Let's pull back the curtain on that Manafort trial tonight. Our Fox News at Night exclusive inside the jury deliberations. Joining me now live in studio, one of the jurors, Paula Duncan. Paula, welcome.
Hi.
Good to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, how close, I want to know, did this jury come to convicting Paul Manafort on all 18 counts?
By one. There was one holdout.
So you all agreed on the 8 counts. The 10 others, there was one person who kept you from making that next step.
That's correct, yes.
What was their reasoning, if they shared with you?
Reasonable doubt. The person, a female juror, was, we all tried to convince her to look at the paper trail. We laid it out in front of her again and again, and she still said that she had a reasonable doubt. And that's the way the jury worked. We didn't want it to be hung, so we tried for an extended period of time to convince her, but in the end, she held out, and that's why we have 10 counts that did not get a verdict.
Is that where the note came from when you all wrote to the judge and said you had a question? The foreman sent a note and said, can you explain for us reasonable doubt or define it? Was it connected to that?
It was, and most of us did not want that question out there, but one of the jurors did. So we felt a little foolish actually sending it, but that's the way the jury works, and due deliberation and everything else required that we submit that question to the judge for that juror.
Now, Judge Ellis talked about, this is what he said about the situation. He said, I've received criticism and threats. I can imagine they would too, meaning if your names were released. If you told jurors at the advance of this trial that their names would be public, or at the outset of this trial that their names would be public, I might see some requests to be excused. And I think, certainly, I had no idea myself that this case would arouse this kind of public interest. I think I said at the outset, I now understand why, but even still, it's a surprise. He kept your names under seal because he was worried about threats to you as jurors. So why are you speaking out?
I don't feel a threat. I am an American. I'm a citizen. I feel I did my civic duty. I don't think I need to hide behind anything. I'm not afraid at all, and I thought that the public, America, needed to know how close this was and that the evidence was overwhelming. I did not want Paul Manafort to be guilty, but he was, and no one's above the law. So it was our obligation to look through all of the evidence, and there were 4 boxes, 4 paper boxes full of paper to look through.
Was it confusing? Because I know at one point there was also a question from the jury about whether the counts, the various counts, could be connected to the evidence that would be linked to them. Do you feel like there was a good job by the Mueller team in putting together exactly what leading you down the path they wanted you to get to? We
didn't want that question out there either. Most of us, when they gave us the box, it was listed what was in each folder. Each folder had a number. When you looked at your notes and looked at what witnesses were connected to which charge, it was pretty easy to connect the dots. So most of us had no problem with that.
What were the deliberations like? Was it heated? Was it?
It was. Crazily enough, there were even tears. Two of the jurors, one of the females that did finally change her vote to guilty, would come in one day and say guilty, and then the next day say, oh no, I felt pressured, I want to change my vote back. So there was a lot of back and forth with that. But finally, once again, we got out all those documents, put them in front of her, and she changed her vote to guilty again. But the one holdout would not.
Was not moving, even after the instructions from the judge where he sent you back and said, keep talking about it, I want you to give this another try. That wasn't enough to move the one. Okay, so you said you wanted Manafort to be innocent. Why?
Because even his critics said he was a brilliant man at what he did. And why wouldn't Trump want him to help with the campaign?
But you are a President Trump supporter.
I am, very much so.
So what did you think about the charges being brought against Manafort? Did you think, you said going in you wanted to think that he was innocent. Did you think they were legitimate on the front end versus what you ultimately decided on the back end?
Well, the charges were legitimate, but the prosecution tried to make the case about the Russian collusion right from the beginning, and of course the judge shut them down on that. We did waste a bit of time with that shenanigans, but yeah.
Did the president's name come up in jury deliberations? Was this politicized in any way?
It was, just because in the evidence there were references to Trump, and to his son-in-law and to the Trump campaign, especially with the Steve Kalk and the pay-to-play issue. So, yeah, it did come up.
Did you feel like there were jurors who were either, like yourself, pro-President Trump or anti, and that influenced their reasoning in any way?
No, I don't. I think we all went in there like we were supposed to and assumed that Mr. Manafort was innocent. We did due diligence, we applied the evidence, our notes, the witnesses, and we came up with the guilty verdicts on the 8 counts.
So the 11 of the 12 jurors, including yourself, would have convicted him on all 18?
Yes.
You saw enough?
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk you through a little bit of a lightning round so we can talk about some different members of the trial, key players, and see how they impacted you. First of all, the Mueller team. What did you make of the prosecutors?
Well, at times, I thought the prosecution was a little bored. I mean, I saw them napping during the trial.
Napping during the trial?
Andres and Greg especially. Yeah. So it kind of sent a message of, we're bored with this. And I'm thinking, well, if you're bored, then why are we here?
Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they did a good enough job to convince you on several of these.
The paper.
The paper trail.
Yes.
Okay, because there were overwhelming amounts of documents, and I know that the judge at many times was trying to limit pictures and testimony about expensive items and all kinds of things, but certainly he left in the documents that he felt were the relevant ones you all needed.
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about the Manafort team and the decision for Mr. Manafort himself not to testify. Did that influence you at all?
It did. I understand why they didn't do it. I mean, we're supposed to assume he's innocent, and therefore he does not need to defend himself. And the judge made that very clear, that there is no requirement for him to do so. However, just based on what I saw, what I heard, I think I would have liked to have heard a little more from the defense. They gave a very easygoing atmosphere to the whole thing. They objected to very little and appeared agreeable throughout it all. Their crosses were even very short when they cross-examined the witnesses. So I don't know. I think I expected a little more.
Okay. Now, Rick Gates, of course, was a business associate of Paul Manafort. He was the key to the whole prosecution, and the defense seemed like most of their case was going to be trying to discredit him, undermine him, talking about him stealing from Paul Manafort, affair or affairs they suggested he may have had. How did he strike you as a witness?
Nervous. Some of us had a problem with accepting his testimony because he took the plea. And so we agreed to throw out his testimony and look at the paperwork, which his name was all over.
Did you find him to be credible?
No, I think he would have done anything that he could to preserve himself. That's just obvious in the fact that he flipped on Manafort.
Okay, so a key witness, but he wasn't the thing that turned it for you. What about Cindy Laporta, the tax preparer, the bookkeeper, who also was testifying under immunity? How critical was she to you all?
Some of us thought she was a good witness. Others did not. I believed her. I think she felt very contrite about her involvement in that. I understand why she did it, but that didn't make it right. I think she was key to me because we saw the false documents, but now we know how they got there.
Okay, what about Judge Ellis himself? A lot of folks have thought he was quite a character throughout this process.
He's amazing.
Was he equally tough on both sides? Do you think he was fair?
I think he would have been equally tough on both sides had the defense been up there more. I think he appeared tougher to the prosecution simply because the prosecution was the people up there the most. He said some funny things, like, for instance, when Andres forgot to mention something in direct, and he came back with a comment about, well, confession is good for the soul.
He does have quips and things that he said along the way that he kept a lot of focus. Now, this is something he said before the trial, before you were involved. He said to the prosecutors, you don't really care about Mr. Manafort's bank fraud. You really care about what information he might give you about Mr. Trump and what might lead to his impeachment or prosecution. What do you make of that characterization?
Exact, spot on.
So you think that this was an unfair prosecution, although you would have convicted him on all 18, or is it how the case came to be for you that's a problem?
It's how it came to be, how it was handled, the attention that it got, and how they tried to relate it to Trump, and that it was the first one in Mueller's lineup to come to trial. And yeah, it might have been a tax audit, but it wasn't. And I think that they used Manafort to try to get the dirt on Trump, or hoping that he would flip on Trump.
Yeah, and that's not what this trial was about. He's now proceeding to another trial in D.C. Were you all aware of that this separate proceeding would happen with him as well on other charges?
I was not at the beginning.
Okay, so how hard was it to stay away from everything you're supposed to stay away from during the trial and not talk to other jurors until you're really in deliberations?
The hard part was not talking about the case to the jurors, because we spent a lot of time just waiting in a small room. And so, you know, I tried to lead people like, what's your favorite food? And because we played those games, I can tell you that the youngest, including the alternates, was in her mid-20s. The oldest on our jury was 69, so average age in the mid-50s. One person drove 108 miles round trip every day to do this. That's a lot of driving. I was almost there, but I was the second furthest away. One person only drove 5 miles round trip.
Did you ever have hesitation once you realized what this trial was going to be, that you were being questioned for, about getting involved with it?
Could you say that again?
Did you ever worry, once you realized, like, oh, wow, I'm being called to be a juror on the Paul Manafort trial, did you have any hesitation about being a juror?
Not at all. It's my civic duty, and I'm pleased to serve my country in any way I can.
All right, well, you've definitely shed some light on it for us. Paula Duncan, thank you for your time.